Hello, Algebra 2. Today we're going to look at another example of basic statistical inference. So in this situation, we have a senior living facility in Pueblo. I think there's actually been a few more of these built recently in Pueblo. So there's a lot of these big facilities around. And I think part of the reason that they're being built in Pueblo is because real estate, even though it's on the up and up in Colorado in general, is still cheaper in some parts of Colorado, like Pueblo, than it is compared to other warm locations around the country. So it's attractive to lots of seniors who are trying to avoid the cold when they're coming from like states in the Northeast, Minnesota, places like that. So it's a big selling point. So this facility is making the claim that at their location, it's at least 78 degrees pretty much on average year round. Of course, it's going to dip higher and lower, but that's the average temperature. So that's their claim to fame. We decide to evaluate that claim. We sample 2 days randomly out of each month. And since we're doing it out of each month, technically this kind of sampling is called stratified. So this is a stratified random sample. Just a little extra information. Anyway, so we do that, and our average in our sample out of those 24 days turns out to only be 72 degrees. So we're thinking we might not agree with their claim. They might be lying to us. So let's evaluate that claim. All right. We also looked at temperature records in order to come up with how much things are spread out. We've got a fairly big spread here of 19 degrees, and I think that's because, especially lately, things have been very up and down. So I thought there'd be a large spread. I just made up these numbers, though. Yeah. Okay, so let's find our null hypothesis. So the null hypothesis is supposed to evaluate their claim of 78 degrees. So we're going to say the true, and it's really important to put this true in there to refer to a parameter and not the statistic. We're trying to hypothesize about the true value of the temperature, at least in Pueblo. So the true average temperature at this location in Pueblo, that refers to where we're talking about. We're not talking about Malaysia, we're not talking about the South Pole, we're talking about Pueblo. So the true average temperature in Pueblo is 78 degrees Fahrenheit, according to their claim. The alternative, we could just say the opposite and say it's not 78 degrees, but based on our sample, I think I'm going to say, any ideas? Less, more? Less. I think that's probably a good way to go on this one. So we'll say here the true average temperature in Pueblo is less than 78 degrees. Okay, so we want to decide whether we can reject their claim or not. So we're going to use our z-test that we learned yesterday to do that. So I'm going to say x bar minus the hypothesized true mean that I want to check over the standard deviation of the population divided by the sample size. I didn't explicitly tell you it in numbers. I think I mentioned it a second ago. How many? 24, because 2 each month. So we'll go ahead and put those numbers in. So x bar, we got 72 in our 24 samples. I'm testing 78. We looked up 19, and there we go. So I'll go to my calculator. Yesterday I showed you 2 other ways to enter it in your calculator. Today I'm showing you another one. There's all kinds of ways to do it correctly. I think that's what you should get. So negative 1.55 if I round. Okay? So there we go. So the rule of thumb we learned yesterday was you take the absolute value, because it doesn't matter if you get a negative or positive test statistic. So the absolute value of z for us is going to be just 1.55. And we want to compare that to what threshold number? 1.96. There's all kinds of numbers to compare this to, but I just taught you a little bit, right? So 1.96, is that true? No. Or you could just put less than. I like to do this to really show that I'm checking to see if it's greater than, though. You know what I mean? So based on that, do I reject or not? I do not. It's not that unusual for our sample to be 72, given the mean is this, based on this situation. we do not have evidence to reject their claim. So the way you want to say that, you don't want to accept the alternative hypothesis. It's not the, or excuse me, you don't want to accept the null hypothesis. You want to say I fail to reject. I just don't have any evidence to the contrary. So that's what I'm going to say. I fail to reject. So that's the phrase we use in statistics. We don't want to say I accept the null. So I fail to reject the null hypothesis. Then a nice key phrasing here. So this is what you should practice when you have this happen in your assignment. There is insufficient or not enough evidence to suggest, based on our sample, maybe someone later on will come up with something else, but from our measurements, we don't have any evidence. There's insufficient evidence to suggest the true average temp in Pueblo is other than 78 degrees. There you go. So there's one more example. This time I showed you how to say it the correct way if you don't have evidence, if the z-test statistic is less than the threshold you're trying to look at. Our threshold was how sure, how certain were we made the right decision? We were 95% certain, if you remember. If you want to be more certain, like 99% certain, you pick a z threshold that's bigger than 1.96. I'll see you next time.